And man, it's such a beautiful day. Have we had a beautiful fall or whatever? It's so good. And I'm going to start with a passage of scripture from what we read last week in Colossians chapter 1. Colossians 1 says, verse 13, "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." So we started last week going through Colossians, and we're going to go through the whole thing. Should be a fun time, but we did a little bit of history and how Paul wrote a letter to this church in what essentially is Turkey. At the time they called it, well, we call it Asia Minor, and so all these churches were popping up, and it was a time of kind of spiritual revival there. People were coming to know Jesus, which is wild, because if you think about it, the story hadn't been shared at like the resurrection, somebody's resurrection, and other people saw it, and it was happening, and people were coming to know Jesus in the face of this empire. And so Paul is writing churches. He hears what's going on, and he writes this church in Colossae. And when you write a letter to someone, and maybe it's been a while, so we'll say email. When you write a letter or an email, you want to say something. There's something you want to say. But when you write a poem, it's usually a little flowery, a little exaggerative. You really want to say something, right? So Carrie, before we were engaged, she wrote, and I wrote. She studied from Spain. She did some of her studies in Spain. I know many of you thought she learned Spanish from me, but she actually learned. She spent a lot of time in Spain, and so we were communicating, and we write this emails. Almost all of them I have. I was tempted to get out one and to read it, but I was like, well, I don't want to disturb the 25-year-old me or whatever. So we had these flowery, poetic emails that we would write to each other. And when you want to say something important, you could write a poem about it. You might exaggerate, right? And so Paul says, this is who rescued you from the darkness, from the kingdom of darkness. He's rescued you from this, right? Now, many of us don't feel very rescued. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk a little bit about why we don't feel very rescued. I know there are times I don't feel very rescued. And so Paul goes into this poem. He goes into stating some things, like many letters do, but then he talks about this. He gives a poem. Here's what he says. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Okay? And then he continues, and he says, for in him all things were created. Now, before we go any further, because I think I was a little messy, I messed up there. Paul wanted to share three things with us in this poem, I think. The first one is this, or with the church in Colossae. If you want to know who God is, this is who he is. This person of Jesus. This one in which you have never met. Maybe he would even say, supernaturally, I have met him. But this is who God is. And so he uses flowery language to share this. And he says this, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or authorities, All things have been created through him and for him. Now, that passage, for in him all things were created. One translation says, for through him God created everything. That Greek word there means in union with. That God, in union with Jesus, created and is supreme over all creation, for through him God created everything. And we're getting poetic, right? In heaven and on earth. Now, what we like to think here is we like to think heavens, thrones, and that sort of thing. But this is just the Paul being poetic. In heaven, now I'm being poetic. Go ahead and be poetic with me. In heaven, come on, work with me here. Get some exercise. In heaven and on earth. Everything, right? Through him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Let me just focus in on everything real quick. The last verse again. I'm a little disheveled, sorry. Everything was created in him and through him. You could also say for him. Everything we're going to enjoy. Everything we're going to... Anybody like football? Maybe not so much this year. Oh, I like it, but maybe you guys. Everything we're going to enjoy, everything we love, the music we play, the family and friends, everything, Paul says, is created for him and in him. This is a beautiful thing. It's something we don't like very much because every once in a while, the creation likes to superimpose themselves over the Creator. I wish I had a first world example of this other than AI. The creation superimposes themselves over the Creator. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Now, that Greek term, by the way, means commends. He holds all things together. It means he sees it as good. Like, it's not bad. Creation is not bad. We don't have to go around judging and saying, this is all horrible. No, it's beautiful. Go outside, it's beautiful. But even if there's a tornado, not that we could understand that, but even if there was a tornado in our city, it's beautiful. Right? The way that God has created things, it is good, and in him all things hold together. And here's another point that Paul wants us to make. Everything is now different because of Jesus. Now, the old and the new coming together. Everything in the Old Testament that we look at, people go, oh, that was a weird way to live, right? We get that. I wouldn't necessarily do it the way they did because I have technology and I have a lot of things that they didn't have, right? And so the people in ancient times, they lived a certain way and they did a certain thing. And then Jesus came, and through him, everything is now different. Now, you may not feel like everything's different. You may feel like, oh, this world, it's so hard. And I get that. But how is everything different in him? Why don't I feel different? Well, the problem is many times we're still living in the old world. Anybody ever heard of evolution? Right? Evolution, like whatever you think about it, there are activities of evolution in this world. And whether we like it or not, we tend to succumb to survival of the fittest. And if there's something you don't like, let's say there's an ant, a group of fiery red ants. What do? Right? That's kind of the way it works. But we also do that with people that we don't agree with, that we don't like, that we disagree with. We try to do this. I wish I had a real world example of this. We'll get there. A lot of times, we're still living in the old world and expecting God to do something new. We're living as if we're still in the kingdom of darkness. And we have been rescued from that kingdom to the kingdom, one translation says, of his dear Son. But we're still living like those old people, not age. And you're wondering why this new world isn't making a difference. I was on social media this week. That was a dumb move. Now listen, I can't tell you how much I wanted to respond to 25 different things. That kingdom of darkness was saying, come on, Marty. Come on, buddy. Come back in. Marty, you are super, come on. This is the conversation you need to be in. Hello, Clarice. Sorry. I don't know. That was weird. What goes in my head? I don't know. I think that's a rated R movie. Oh. The truth is, everything is now different as a result of me being rescued by Jesus out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of his own kingdom. And it's really hard. There's a constant temptation to go that other kingdom. He continues, Christ is also, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. Now look at these words here. Firstborn, supreme, head, beginning. Paul is claiming superiority and priority to Christ. That's what he's doing. He's saying, now think about how revolutionary this is. For us, we hear about Jesus all the time, and it's a big argument. For him, there was one person in charge of the whole Roman Empire, and it wasn't Paul, and it wasn't Jesus. To people. It was the person who would eventually kill Paul, Nero, who was wacko, if you hear any stories of him in history. I mean, he was wild. And Paul was saying, listen, as a matter of fact, this letter would have gotten him killed. Because he was saying Christ is the head, once again, is the head of the church. What's he saying? He's not saying he's the head of this group of buildings that have stature and power and political weight across the Roman Empire. No, that wasn't a thing. He was saying Christ is the head of this group of people that are spreading out across the Roman Empire. And as such, he is the head over our lives. He is the firstborn, the supreme, the head, the beginning. He is large and in charge. Which comes to our third thought process, the third thing Paul wants to say. And that is, we now have the blueprint for a new humanity which is on offer through the gospel. This is good, right? Listen, you want to know a new way to be human? Here's what I'd like you to do. I love The Chosen, but don't just watch The Chosen. Go to the Gospels, read them, follow the life of Jesus, and look what he did, look what he commanded. For God, in all his fullness, was pleased for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. You guys know how I always share the good news, right? This is another way of sharing the good news. God, through him, is reconciling to himself all things. Nope, you can go back. Next one. Whether things on earth or in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. If you want to know how to live in this broken world, follow after Jesus. Amen. Yeah. You want to come up and tell your story? That'd be perfect right now. That'd be awesome. Well, go to the Gospels, listen to what he commands, and go after it. We have a blueprint. We have a blueprint. And I'm wondering if we're spending any time in it or enough time in it, besides the YouVersion verse of the day, which is great. But I'm wondering if it's enough. For God, you found that blueprint one. Look at you go. You just made it. Fantastic. All right, let's go beyond that. Keep going. Oh, that's where we're at. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you're a follower of Jesus, you've been rescued. Yeah, you've been rescued from the darkness. He has come down, just like he did with the people of Israel. He's come down to pick you up. He's come down to rescue you. He's come down and picking you up. Now, you may not be there yet. That's fine. We're praying for you. You'll get there. He's coming down to pick you up. And here's how to know when you're being tempted. Get ready for this. Here's how to know when you're being tempted to go back into the darkness. If you're starting or continuing in drama, you're going back. You know what I mean by drama? Think about your family life. Think about those around you who you view are doing foolish things, right? Right? And all of us, by the way, all of us do it. So also look at yourself, okay? Now, when you have this idea that, I have stupid things or other people are doing foolish things, right? What you can do, what you're tempted to do is be drawn into the drama. Just like on social media this week. I want you to be honest with me. Was anyone tempted? If you're not on social media, God bless you. Anyone tempted to respond to something that was outlandish? Wow, you guys' hands went up. Yeah. I won't ask who gave in to that temptation, right? Because I'm telling you, there's no judgment. I was like, But here's a few other things. When your spouse or somebody close to you, your parent, if you're a teenager, asks you to do something, and it wells up inside of you the pride, and you're like, I'm watching football. I'm sorry, this is my own story, guys. I'm just preaching to myself at this point. Or when somebody says, hey, I need your help this week. And inside you're like, do you know I am so busy? My life is so important. Fathers, this is just a Bible verse. When you provoke your children to wrath, people, when you can't bridle, James says, your tongue, or when you loosen your tongue to say whatever it is that you want to say because you think that you can say it, because you think, I'm going to say whatever I want to say, because I'm like the living embodiment of Eminem. That was not in my notes either. I don't know. I don't know. Why would I? Paul would say, when you fight over opinions, over things that don't matter in Romans chapter 14. In another verse, it says, when you get angry, stop it. Right, what is going on here? Paul is reminding us, James is reminding us, Peter is reminding us, the gospel writers are reminding us, there is a kingdom that you are now a part of, and the problem is you are tempted to go back in on a regular basis, and you're thinking, oh, this is great, like the people of Israel who were left slavery, and we're like, oh, remember when we had fruit? That was so good. No! You have freedom. And Paul continues, he says, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel, the good news, the evangelion. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. This is what we know. We know that there's going to be drift. There's going to be drift. And the drift is going to be because of drama, and the drama is going to bring us in. Ooh, that's good. It's going to bring us in. This is what I would say. Don't cancel people. Cancel drama. The temptation is there. There are people who are not you that are idiots. All of us. That's my point. Every single one of us have a temptation to go back in to this kingdom. And so I was thinking through this. And many of you read my email, but I'm just going to, this is why I think this is important. I think it's important because Jesus, at the center of the Roman occupation in Israel, was the proverbial adult in the room. And I think we're at this place where somebody, or I would say a collection of people, have to be the adults in the room. By the way, I got to tell you, the adult in the room, being the adult in the room is not easy. You know how I know it's not easy? Because nobody wants to be it. Especially in today's world. And I'm going to recap my email because I think it's that important at the end. I told the story of my kids. I can't even remember what I said. But there's this version of my kids, so this is going to be a paraphrase, There's this version of my kids, and they're four wonderful human beings. I mean, if you know them. To know them is to love many of them. Just kidding. They're all amazing. The oldest one will come in. I won't say names, but you know who the oldest one is. Say something like, I don't have my homework done, and I have to get it done because I have 3 weeks to do it. So then the twin brother would say something like, I have soccer practice, and that is actually hard, so stop being foolish, stupid, whatever he would say. Well, then the third one would walk in and say something like, don't call me stupid, you're stupid. And I'll be just listening to this, going, what is going on? And then the fourth one, the third one will then kind of push at the second one, and the second one will kind of come back, and there'll be a little physical altercation. And then in the process of this altercation, the fourth one will walk in and then get hit by the physical altercation and say something like, I hate you, you're stupid, get out, rah, rah, rah. And you notice how the fourth thing had nothing to do with the first thing, which was, there's some homework to be done, and I got to do it. So here's what I wrote. So when I walk into the room with my kids, it's not that I shut down the conversation. I need to tackle what the conversation was and how they can get it back on track. Disagreement is not the enemy. Discussion is not the enemy. In fact, it's a must if we're going to tackle the issues that our world faces. And this then takes me, or whoever it might be, slowing down and teaching the children what is appropriate and what is not in regards to conversation and debate. And on social media, the children equals men and women who act a lot like you and me. They are not children. I am not a child, but sometimes I act like it. That there is something about the hearts of children that exudes humility when they are at their best is important for us to remember here. Many followers of Jesus accumulate knowledge, and in doing so develop a heart of stone, which seems to be the antithesis of becoming humble as this little child. So I beg you today, as you might be assessing how to follow Jesus and grow up in him, please be the adult in the room. Please don't allow your conversations, online or in person, to devolve into what Paul would call foolish and stupid arguments because you know that they produce quarrels. Learn how to de-escalate situations and shower the love of Jesus on those who so badly need it. And if you want to yell and scream about some post, feel free to call me and I'll listen. People will listen. I get it. There are people who are saying harsh things. There are people who are doing harsh things. I get it. But we, as followers of Jesus, must be the adults in the room. Because we know who we were a long time ago. And we know that we were rescued. Not because of who we are. Look at me, I'm rescued. Because of him. That's just it. Because of Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. We've been rescued. So it's time for us to go out and do some rescuing. We're no longer in that kingdom. We're in a new kingdom. So let's help one another to be the best kingdom followers that we can be. Because goodness, we need the help. I need the help. Father,